Well, good evening, everyone. It's just gone 5 o'clock and we're ready now to start this NAHT live broadcast. We've entitled it COVID-19, the response of NAHT. We're delighted this evening to have a number of guests with us, and it's my job to introduce them. My name's Harry Greer, currently working as an organiser in Northern Ireland for NAHT. We're delighted this evening to be joined by Ruth Davis, our National President. Welcome to Northern Ireland, even if it's virtually, Ruth. Also delighted to welcome our General Secretary, Paul Whiteman, all the way from Haywards Heath, but again, remotely. Some of the other faces you might know a little bit better: Helena McCormick, our Director in Northern Ireland, and Graham Galt, our Northern Ireland President. I will be running the event this evening with the great help of one of our other organisers, Laura Flynn, in the background, and we appreciate Laura's support as well. I'm just going to take you through some of the ways in which the meeting will run and the agenda of what we will do. So first of all, just to say to you, if you want to say hello to people, let people know you're here if you use the chat function at the bottom. And throughout the evening, Laura will be dropping some messages in there as well. But please do use the chat function and say hello to people. We're trying to make the meeting as interactive as possible. So we will bring or try to bring members up on screen if you want to ask a question. We will apologise in advance. We've had a lot of questions. We may not get everybody on screen, but any questions that have been asked, we will either answer tonight or pick up after the broadcast. When you submit your question, if you want it to be for a particular person to answer, please make that clear. And please put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Please don't use the Q&A box for chat. If someone else has asked a similar question, then please vote. You can go into the question and answer section and upvote their question rather than ask the same question again. Our meeting is being recorded for members only, so please be aware of this when you appear on screen. A replay will be available to watch tomorrow. If you want to tweet, the hashtag for tonight's event is #NICOVID School Response. Please be careful that you don't tweet any photos where the chat and members' comments are visible. You are welcome to tweet photos of the panelists. What a lovely panel we have indeed. So I'm going to kick off by asking Paul Whiteman, our General Secretary, and I have to say we really appreciate Paul taking the time to be with us here in Northern Ireland this evening. And I'm going to ask Paul to kick things off with an update from his point of view. Thank you, Paul.
Well, thanks, Harry, and good evening, everybody. And I'm delighted to be with you, albeit virtually. I think it must be nearly a year since I've had the pleasure of coming and seeing members in Northern Ireland, and I'm missing your hospitality and your humour. I always walk away with a bit of a flea in my ear and a little bit of ribbing once I've been over about how we operate across the nations, and I received similar in Wales, and I can't wait to get back across and see you soon. And that's because I am so proud of what you are doing as a profession. As a professional trade union official, I've had the pleasure of representing many different professions, and you are a beacon of light in my career for the commitment and just sheer hard work that you exhibit all the time, but never more so than right now in the middle of this pandemic. Your depth of courage, your resources and your innovation are a shining light during very, very dark times. And I know that the Northern Ireland office and the Northern Ireland Committee are doing all that they can to advocate on your behalf during these difficult times, and I'll bring whatever weight I can from the General Secretary's office and the weight of the rest of the National Union to support that effort. And that's why I'm so pleased to be here this evening. And I'd like to pay a special tribute, first of all, to the Northern Ireland Committee, who I know well. We always have a great debate when I come and see the committee, and they're always solution focused and always trying to find the way through the difficulties, but never afraid to make the point and never afraid to stand up to what is amounting to stupidity from government a lot of the time, to be frank. I think being careful with our words is running out of tarmac now, to be quite frank. We need to be very plain in our expressions of our dissatisfaction with all the governments in the UK. And for the governments in the UK to explain that it's really difficult because this is a new pandemic, a new situation, something that we've never faced before. It's fast moving and therefore you have to give them some space. Well, I'm afraid the time for that understanding is fast running out. School leaders, educators have predicted the difficulties within your sector at every turn, a long time before they've happened. And yet the failure of all politicians to respond to that and make the right decisions quickly enough to give you time to respond and time to organise has represented absolute failure. And it's time now that we push back and we recognise the difficulties that ministers, your minister Peter Weir, are creating. And I understand that he's probably at his lowest confidence level for some time with educators and school leaders, and government has got to really begin to rebuild that confidence so that you can have the support that you need to look after the children in your care. So I say this to governments: they need to begin to listen to you, the profession. They need to begin to listen to you as educators. They need to work with us as a representative body of school leaders so that we can find solutions and make sure that we care for the children that you care so passionately about. Because let's be clear, politicians will look for the headlines and politicians will want to demonstrate that they care about children. But I know that next to the families, you are the people that truly care about the future of the children that attend your schools, and you're the people that truly have the solutions to the difficulties in front of us. So for me, that's probably enough right now until we get into the detail of what's happening in your context in Northern Ireland. But I'll be happy to supplement the conversation with our experience in England, and Ruth will from Wales, and from a national point of view as we go through this evening. But I'm genuinely proud of what you're achieving as a profession, what we're achieving as a union. And thank you very much for your support, your patience when you're frustrated with us, and your continuing commitment to get things right. But thank you for the invitation this evening, Graham.
Thank you very much, Paul. Just to say to everyone, when Paul came on the call tonight, he said he was hoping that when he came to Northern Ireland, we could bring him some good news. I'm not sure we can, Paul, but we're going to turn to our director, Helena Nye, to give us an update from a Northern Ireland specific point of view. Helena. Maybe just want to unmute there, Helena.
Apologies, sorry. So I was just saying, I'd firstly like to start by echoing Paul's comments in commending our membership for the truly outstanding work that they're doing under the most challenging of circumstances. We fully appreciate that these are anxious and deeply uncertain times. Over the next few minutes, I'm going to outline some of the present challenges as we see them through talking to members, and then I'm going to pass over to Graham, who'll provide you with more detail about what we are doing to address these challenges. Yesterday, the Chief Scientific Officer stated clearly that children play a larger role in transmission of the virus than we previously realised. He further stated that we have seen a significant number of outbreaks in Northern Ireland, including some large outbreaks associated with schools. He clarified that this has been due to interactions by children inside and outside of school, not just at the school gates or in parks and other locations outside of schools, as some politicians have asserted in recent times. This is incredibly worrying, but it underlines why, unless it is vital for the welfare of the child, that it is right that schools are closed to the majority of pupils. We know our members want to work with parents, communities and governments to tackle the virus in every way that they can. Under normal circumstances, school is undoubtedly the best place for children, and we know that members passionately believe that. But at the present time, everything must be done to fight the virus, and this of course means the closure of provision for the majority of children. Special schools are of course open to all of their pupils. We know that these members are continuing to operate in the most challenging of circumstances to ensure the needs of our most vulnerable and complex children are met with limited support from government. It is of significant regret that the government did not listen to our pleas for robust contingency planning measures last summer. We knew that another lockdown was likely, and as a union we have expressed consistent willingness to work alongside government to develop such contingency planning. It is also of significant regret that the Minister's continuity direction came in the form of a legal order rather than guidance. We were not consulted on this prior to its publication, and we have significant concerns as a result of it. The tone and rigidity of a legal order denies school leaders the flexibility and professional judgment afforded to ensure tailored solutions can be applied to each setting to meet pupil need appropriately. It is also of significant regret that yet again the Minister did not communicate the most recent plans with schools first, but rather he used Robbie Meredith. Schools should not have to learn about vital decisions through Twitter or Nolan. They should be told directly at a reasonable time during the working day. This regrettable situation could have been prevented had the Minister listened to unions and the professions. Whilst we are in an undeniably challenging and unusual set of circumstances, the countless government U-turns have undoubtedly raised the stress levels of staff and parents, and most concerningly of all, they have been of detriment to the mental health and well-being of many of our pupils. We want to assure you that as ever, we are continuing to advocate on your behalf at every level of government. We've held a number of meetings this week in order to ensure your concerns are brought forward. We've met with members of every sector, and we know there are acute sector-specific concerns as well as universal issues of concerns, such as, firstly, staff welfare. You and your staff are under significant stress. Many of you have received communications from other unions this week, the impact of this on relationships, and the fact that this time round many staff and many of you are feeling more burnt out than ever after 9 months of the pandemic. We know that you've worked through the summer, through half term, through Christmas. You've worked tirelessly with immense dedication. Many of you will have suffered your own traumas due to the virus, and many of you will have your own caring and homeschooling challenges. The burden of these cannot be underestimated, and I know that Graham will talk a little later about the importance of your own welfare in such challenging times. Secondly, contrary to what some indeed seem to think, education is not childcare. The fact that provision in special and nursery has been referred to as childcare undermines your professionalism and that of those in teaching, whilst demonstrating a distinct lack of understanding. Thirdly, uptake of key worker provision. This is a time of significant uncertainty. We know members are anxious about the uptake of key worker and vulnerable children places in their schools. Many have already reported that numbers are significantly higher than the last time round and are rising. And this leads me to my next point, staffing challenges. Many schools, but special schools in particular, are experiencing significant staffing challenges. We know of reports of special schools whose staffing capacity has been reduced by 25% or more, yet they are expected to provide support to 100% of their pupils. Schools cannot operate with a skeleton staff, especially for the most vulnerable and complex children who require specialist care. We know that even if substitute staff can be sought, they are unlikely to have the necessary and relevant training to meet unique pupil need. Provision of remote learning and supervised learning in tandem. We know that staff cannot do the impossible. They cannot provide remote learning and supervised learning at the same time. Schools need time to embed home learning and ensure that adequate resourcing and planning can be put in place. We also know that there are acute challenges in every setting. We met with the majority of special principals on Tuesday. We know colleagues in special are having to make truly harrowing decisions and that the safety considerations are huge. Special school practitioners are educators, not medical practitioners, and DE must realise this. We've written to government and we held a meeting today to stress the need for flexibility, resources and priority vaccinations so that special schools can put measures into place to appropriately and professionally meet the needs of their pupils. We know that many of our special schools are vastly under-resourced and beyond capacity, and the pandemic has brought the harsh reality of this even further into sharp focus. We know that colleagues in primary are deeply concerned about academic selection and the impact that the uncertainty is having on their pupils now. We've been asking the Minister to work with school leaders to develop a contingency plan since last April. We've worked closely with the Education Committee on this matter, and today we have provided detailed commentary in response to the proposal for a hybrid transfer system put forward by Robbie Butler. And if anybody has been listening to Radio Ulster today, they will know that our proposal has received significant prominence. We know that for post-primary, the delays in selection will have an impact in both the selective and non-selective sector, and that this will have significant implications for planning going forward. With regard to the cancellation of GCSEs and A-levels, we have publicly urged the Minister to, we previously publicly urged the Minister to develop contingency planning measures since the start of last term. We held countless meetings with officials and presented proposals directly to the Minister, and regrettably he did not listen. We've been told now that it may be 2 weeks before further guidance is issued. This is unacceptable when the situation was foreseeable. We know that many school leaders feel their pupils are demoralised. Last night, we reissued our position statement to the Minister on contingency proposals, and we urged him and his officials to meet with us to ensure that we can find a workable solution. We know that this has been a highly stressful week for nursery colleagues. The decision to close was made too late and yet again is a shambolic example of ministerial communication. We know that as in special, nursery children cannot socially distance and remote learning is highly limited, which brings a significant amount of difficulties for those within this sector. This year, last year, we redoubled our campaigning effort again in respect of nursery release. And we're pleased that at least after meeting with us, the government has agreed to put together a business plan to make this a reality. As we know, the pressures and administrative duties of COVID alone are a full-time job, never mind having to teach full-time alongside such duties. These are by no means all of the issues that have been raised with us. This is really just the tip of the iceberg, and we welcome your questions this evening. And if we don't have the answers tonight, we will continue to push government for them. So now I'm going to pass over to Graham, who's going to expand further on the work that we're doing on your behalf.
Thanks, Helena. And thank you to Harry, thank you to Ruth for attending, and for Paul for being here, and Laura in the background. It's great that so many of you are here. It's a really challenging time that we're in. As Helena has outlined, there are many significant areas of concern right now, some of which are so concerning that they are genuinely about health and mortality in some cases. Each of these issues represents a front at which we are fighting hard on your behalf. Throughout this crisis, we've worked really hard to provide you with regular updates and advice, which I know you have very much appreciated, especially given the silence from others that you should reasonably expect to be able to advise you. But we also know that even still, there are many urgent questions that we are pressing government on at every possibility. And there are others that very possibly we have not yet encountered. We're seeking answers about the use of bubbles at the moment and the potential use of hubs. Of course, we're continually raising the question of DE's definition of key workers, including the statement that only one parent needs to be a key worker. We're working on your behalf around the realities of remote learning. We're continually arguing about the issue of pupils without access to devices, and even the shortage of viable devices in your schools for the kids who are in the building. We're working hard on the urgent need for vaccinations to be prioritised for our frontline workforce. These are just, of course, flavour of some of the urgently pressing issues. We also have the ongoing, hugely significant issues of anti-bullying legislation, special needs provision, workload, and so on and so on. And of course, we continue to manage some very serious casework on your behalf. It has been continually disappointing that the publication of guidance has been so very slow in comparison to the fast pace of change and the significant requirements that are being placed upon your shoulders every day. But at the end of the day, colleagues, you are professionals, and we are working hard to ensure that your professionalism is defended and upheld. We know there are dangers in this situation and significant challenges in terms of the managing of the health and welfare of your staff and your pupils, and indeed the entire communities that you serve. And we will continue to do our utmost to protect you, our members, and we use all powers available to us as a trade union. We're calling upon the government to have daily high-level meetings with us to address your questions on a daily basis. We will continue to work collegially with other trade union colleagues because, of course, we know that many staff in our teaching and support unions rightly have significant concerns about their welfare too. It is essential that we continue to lead and maintain a collective approach to address these issues and to ensure that positive staff relations can be maintained in your schools. Many of you folk have expressed concern at the relationship between the education sector and the Minister and the Department going forward. And this is, of course, a significant concern for us. The hallmark of educational leadership at governmental level has been marked by last-minute changes and U-turns and an abject failure to consult with the very people who can make all of this work, which is you. We have explained in no uncertain terms to the Minister and his departmental advisors that the integrity of our profession has been degraded, demoralised and deeply insulted, and both the department and the minister acknowledge that this must be improved, but as yet we see little sign of movement in this direction. For the future, I can tell you that the way our profession has been treated will not be forgotten, nor will the blatant disregard for the welfare of our children. But for now, we have to deal with the challenge that we have now. We, all of us, have to brace ourselves to take on the significant challenge of this third wave. We will get through it. We will love our children. We will love our staff. We will embrace and support each other, despite the often counterproductive directions from our government. We will work within the law and we will carry each other through this. What has made school leadership in this place the envy of the other nations is how we galvanise, how we mobilise, and how we get the job done. And we will get the job done, but I will reiterate to you now, we will not forget how our profession has been treated.
Thank you very much, Graham, and thank you, Helena. Very inspiring words, and give us a chance to give members a chance to see the wide breadth of work and the depth of work that's ongoing. We're going to run a poll now, which everyone can take part in, and then we're going to start calling up members to ask questions that they've submitted through the question and answer box, or indeed through the organizer's email today. So when we call you up, if you please make sure that your camera is on and that you have unmuted. Our Vice President Liam is going to have first go at that. But just before we do that, we're going to launch a poll, and we ask you to take part in this. And you will see the poll at the bottom of the picture between question and answer and chat. So please do take part. And so, Liam, if I can hand over to you to ask your question, and then the panelists between each of you, if you can decide who wishes to pick up each point. Liam.
Good evening, everyone. Was caught a bit unawares there, so I haven't shaved or even combed my hair. But I was on a Zoom with probably 20 odd principals today, and I spoke to some principals in the north of the province as well. And we're all having issues with numbers increasing by the day. What can be done to keep the numbers in school to a reasonable amount?
If you're happy, Harry, I'll just address that one. Hi, Liam. Despite your hair and your beard, you do look lovely. Good to see you, and thanks for your question. And of course, this is a question that will be on everybody's minds. Last week, in a meeting with the department, it was made clear, I asked the question about who key workers are and how many key workers need to be how many parents need to be key workers to enable their children to be eligible for the support. And following that meeting, I put into the update 2 key workers, or one parent being a key worker in a single parent family. I had a phone call from the SPAD later that day to tell me that actually that was not really in the spirit of making our provision available as widely as possible. And I said to him, Peter, somebody has to put a ceiling on this. And over a period of time then, well, you know what happened on Friday and over the weekend, the department then made clear, and they pursued it with the continuity directive to put it into law, that only one parent needs to be a key worker. In fact, only that one parent who is a key worker needs to be working at home. Since then, of course, you have all experienced the outworking of that, and we know that there is abuse of this provision. We know that in every school we have parents swinging the lead to get a wee bit of free childcare, and the outcome is, of course, Liam, as you're describing there, some of our schools are now more or less at 45–50% capacity. From anecdotal evidence, we'll see what comes up in the poll that's just running at the moment. So the department have said there's no cap to that. They're not going to cap it. They are not going to tell us what percentage is considered to be safe. In response to our concerns being raised with the department again this morning, they said, okay, we will have a look at the information that we get coming from SIMS over the course of the weekend, and we may need to review the eligibility of who can take this service up. But the implication of that is that, I mean, if they find that too many people are taking it, are they actually going to tell parents, you were eligible last week, but you're not now this week? It just gives you an indication of the level of wisdom that we're dealing with in the department. They have very little understanding of what is actually being faced by you on the coalface. And not only do they have little understanding, when we try to give them understanding, they have little empathy. So at the moment we're arguing on this, Liam, there isn't a cap on it. They don't consider there to be a safe ceiling, but we'll see how things pan out over the next few days. But at the moment, we can see that this is going to be a problem. And as Paul said at the beginning in his introduction, this seems to be a problem right across the UK.
But I'll just take an opportunity to add, Graham, very briefly, as it is right across the UK. I've just come from a meeting in England where we submitted the challenge to the Department for Education about saying, well, if the public health objective stated by the Prime Minister is to stop social mixing and therefore get a grip on the rate of infection, allowing mass mixing in schools when you've just closed schools to get a grip seems to be at odds. There seems to be tension there, and you can't have your cake and eat it. So we've submitted that almost as a formal question in England. We're going to work on that with our legal team over the next day or so to see if we can identify a slightly more formal challenge that we can make. I don't want to set hairs running here, but perhaps we ought to investigate that in the context of Northern Ireland as well. I know that the regulations may be slightly different. We did a similar thing in Wales a couple of days ago. So perhaps we'll reinvigorate that again, and we'll see if there's something slightly more formal that we can do to bring some pressure to bear as well as we understand what's going on. I think there's a bit of denial going on as well about the level of occupancy that's happening in schools. I think in governments, they're saying, oh, this is all anecdotal. Yeah, everybody's going to say this, but it's only 1 or 2 schools. Well, we're running surveys and you're looking at your SIMS data as well, where we're going to prove the point that it's quite widespread and quite worrying levels. And at some point, we might have to appeal to parents as well to say, just because you qualify, you have a public duty and a duty to your own community as well, not to use a space just because you can. If we want to get this rate of infection down, we've all got to play nicely together on this one as well. That worked in England during the March pandemic. I'm not persuaded it's going to work again, but it's certainly worth a try. So just a few things there that we can build on from Graham's comments, I hope.
And I was just going to add briefly as well, just from our conversations with DE this morning, I mean, what they're saying to us is that there's 50% occupancy in special and 20% in mainstream. But anecdotally, we're hearing much higher numbers. And certainly the poll that comes in today, that will be very useful in advancing our investigations here to take that question forward.
Okay, thank you to all of our panelists. Our next question is going to come from Clodagh Webb. And if Clodagh, oh good, you've got your camera on and you've unmuted. Clodagh, go ahead.
Okay, it's a little bit similar to Liam's, but a slightly different slant. The definition around vulnerable children is vague, and the guideline that only one parent needs to be a key worker means that we're reaching a point. The number of applications for places for children is negating the strategy to reduce the spread of the virus. Can the union seek clarification on tightening the guidelines, and can they ask the department that, to stress that attendance at school is a last resort?
Yeah, I'm happy to have a go at that if that's okay. So obviously the guidance that was released earlier this week from DE, it talked about attendance being mandatory. And I think that this was a really quite a badly worded document, because it's mandatory to provide the provision, but it's not mandatory to take it up. And I think that there's been an element of confusion that has come about as a result of that. Now, this morning when we were speaking to DE, we did raise this very issue, and we've asked them to provide greater clarity and communication to parents. Now, they assured us today that guidance and kind of further communication will be to parents, but I don't have details on the timescale of that. But absolutely, I think this is a huge issue and we do need to get clarity.
Thank you, Helena. can I ask a question on behalf of Alison Lindsay, who has asked or alerted us to the fact that today in a principal cluster group, the link officer for that area had informed them that a first aider and the child protection teacher must be in school at all times. And Alison's question is that actually true? Do we know the answer to that, Graham or Helena?
I've asked that question of Adrian Murphy, but haven't yet got an answer. I just asked that question recently. If the answer comes in before the end of this broadcast, I'll let you know. But it's an important question. Thank you.
Okay, and now we're going to go to the next question from Pauline McAllister. Pauline, are you there? Can you switch your video on and unmute? There you go. Pauline, if you just want to unmute there.
Hi, is that better now?
Welcome, yeah, that's great.
Thank you very much. My question is very similar to the two that have been asked already. I'm just looking it up here on the screen. Bear with me. What percentage of the school enrolment attending as the child of a key worker or vulnerable child is considered feasible to enable a safer environment for both children and staff at this time through achieving lower numbers in the building and in classrooms? The Minister expects numbers attending to be low. Has the Minister defined and clarified low, considered alongside yesterday's statement provision for the children of key workers is mandatory? The numbers in our school attending are high, and I think it must be noted that this is not the same as the previous lockdown, as many parents are still working. And the staff are expected to prepare and provide high quality education remotely, which involves interaction throughout the day, and attend school for supervision responsibilities. And one issue that I've had this week is several key workers working from home. Are they eligible to request supervision in school for their child?
Graham or Helena, anyone want to pick that up?
I thought Helena was moving to unmute there. Yes, if they're key workers, even if they're working from home, yes is the answer. Do you know, during the first lockdown, I think take-up rates, Paul and Ruth will correct me if I'm wrong, take-up rates in England and Wales were around 15 to 20%, but here in Northern Ireland they were about 1%. I actually think that our department here was a bit embarrassed on the UK stage and have gone to great lengths to make sure that this time we have take-up rates of 15 to 20%. And they've gone to such lengths that they have put this into the Educational Continuity Directive, which the Minister has used coronavirus legislation to require us to do this. So we're legally compelled to do this, and we're now legally compelled to have the same understanding of the definition of what a key worker is and a vulnerable child as the Department of Education. So Pauline, it's really disappointing that we're in this situation, but the blame, I have to say, just lies fully with the Minister and with his advisors around him. What we can do is just give this our very best. But yes, I would say to you, err on the safe side, because this has been put into law, err on the safe side. So even if you have a suspicion that a parent is swinging the lead, don't challenge it. Give the parent the provision they need. I know it's another number, but this is what we pray going to be short-lived. Up until half term, that's what we're hoping for. But at the moment, while we're working with this definition, it's a legal requirement. So we just have to make it work. I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and just to say, we're also doing all that we can to kind of explore the parameters of the legality of this particular piece of legislation. Our legal team are looking at it, and certainly when the new continuity direction comes out, which we're expecting, potentially they said today or tomorrow, obviously it's late, we haven't received it. But when that does come out, we will also have our legal team look at it rigorously to see kind of, what are the parameters within that.
Okay, thank you, Helena. Thank you, Pauline, for your question. We're going to move now to Nicola Stevenson. Nicola sent us in a number of questions, and if you can just come up on screen, Nicola, and unmute. Hi there. Nicola, could I ask you, we will get back to you on the questions you asked. Could I ask you to ask, you'd asked 3 questions related directly to classroom assistants. Could I ask you to focus on those, please?
Yes, the question I have, can we use classroom assistants to supervise pupils who are vulnerable or children of key workers? Because if teachers are delivering remotely, either from school or from home, we can't be expecting them to do double jobs. So can we use the classroom assistants to supervise those children? To put it into context, we, the last time, were able to close after the second week because there wasn't an uptake of places. On Monday, I have 80 children coming into school.
Nicola, I'll answer that one. Thank you for your questions. Nicola, the Department of Education obviously don't want any schools to close, which is, you know, feeding into this definition that they've put out. They don't want any bad press, obviously. First of all, your question, can I direct a classroom assistant to supervise? Yes, you can. It's in a classroom assistant's job description contractually that they can supervise children. They can't teach, they can't be required to teach, but if you have, and the teacher doesn't necessarily need to be in the room. If you have a teacher directing the supervised learning, I'm using the department's term as opposed to teaching, if you have the teacher directing the learning activities, the classroom assistant can supervise. There is some questionable guidance coming out from some of the unions that some of our classroom assistants would be members of, but as far as I'm aware at the moment, yeah, classroom assistants can. And it's important that we know that because our teachers do need to be available to support remote learning and to answer queries from parents and make phone calls and check in with vulnerable children and so on. So yes, your classroom assistants can be used for that purpose.
Graham, could I maybe add something to that? After a meeting this afternoon with teaching and non-teaching unions, where all were in agreement that the classroom assistants could supervise and that they did not have to have a teacher in the room with them, but all agreed that it was important to have a number of teachers or a teacher somewhere to have oversight and to be there as a reference point. And then, Nicola, you had another question about a staff member with their own vulnerable child and how they were affected about getting to work. Do you want to ask that one?
Yes, I have a classroom assistant who has a child with Down syndrome, and she has been refused a place in her primary school. She attends a mainstream primary school and there isn't the wraparound care, they say, available to look after that child in school. So she's now in a position, she's telling me she can't come to work next week.
I'll just answer that one as well, if it's okay. I'm hoping the member of the school in question isn't a member of NAHT, because the member of the principal of the school at which the child with Down syndrome is enrolled has to make provision under the continuity direction for that child. So I would ask you, Nicola, just to tell your classroom assistant that they should approach the school and ask them if they can make that provision for the child so that she can attend her place of work. That's what the legalities say just at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask just one final question? If we have offered a place to a child with special educational needs and the parents have decided they're not going to send the child to school, what obligation do we have to provide assistance for that child whilst they're remote learning?
So I assume from your question there, Nicola, that the classroom assistant is assigned to that child? Yeah. The
child has a statement and has hours attached for classroom assistance,
so
however, coming into school.
Yeah, the classroom assistant can still be asked to provide some support remotely to that child. And it would actually enable that classroom assistant to potentially work from home. They don't necessarily need to be in your school building to provide that support, but yes, they can be asked to provide that support remotely.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nicola, for your questions. We're going to go in a moment to Sean Rafferty, and I think this is maybe more moving us away from the COVID situation in a way to exams. But just before we do this, Paul, could I ask our General Secretary, Paul, to comment on vaccines? And I know I tuned into the English and Welsh broadcast last night, and I know the issue of asking for school staff to be vaccinated came up, and what our stance is on that.
Sure, we've got a number of things that we're saying at the moment in all jurisdictions that we need to organise a safe return, and vaccines is one of the things on that list. It's not as straightforward as it may sound. There is quite a debate amongst even our membership about should we be looking to push ourselves up the vaccine list because of the clinical decisions that are being made about who should be first to save lives. But it strikes us that the government has to do both things, really. If we're saying in schools, and it's only in schools that we're saying we want to put the most infected and the most virulent groups of people into a confined space with lack of ventilation, lack of PPE for prolonged periods of time, that must be firing the risk of infection for school staff through the roof, because that's what we're being told by the clinicians what not to do. We're doing everything we're being told not to do. And the only way, therefore, to protect our teams is to get them vaccinated. So we're pushing that up the top of the list. The counter to that is, well, what about staff in supermarkets that are keeping us fed and everything else? But I think their conditions are slightly different in terms of the size and space and lengths of time that they're in close quarter contact with the most infected groups. So that's certainly on the list, and we're calling for that right now. And I understand there's all sorts of petitions running across all 3 jurisdictions, and that's gaining some momentum as well. So hopefully we'll get some satisfaction on that over the next few days.
Okay, thank you, Paul. We go now to Sean, and Sean, if you would switch your video on and unmute, and please ask your question. Welcome.
Good evening, everyone. My question is slightly different. It's probably looking at the logistics of a large grammar school where we have been asked to provide remote learning and at A-level and GCSE, but we haven't been given a directive as to what exactly is going to be assessed in June or May or June. And again, when our teachers are asking us as leaders, what am I going to provide? Do the mitigations that the Minister indicated early in December, do they still stand? And can they, colleagues, can they lobby on behalf of schools to make sure that we don't wait until the middle of March or April to find out exactly what evidence is required to justify the grades and hence create a fiasco in the summertime?
Yeah, it really is a dreadful situation in terms of the lack of clarity that's come forward. I mean, the Minister did say yesterday in the Assembly that he was intending to get some sort of additional guidance out in the next 2 weeks. Now, we wrote to him last night again with our proposal document, just saying, look, we want to sit down with you as soon as possible. We can convene a group of school leaders to come and talk directly to you. I've just received a holding response, but we have been invited to go and meet with SIA next week. So unfortunately, I can't really provide any more clarity than that, but it is something that we understand that this is a really horrendous situation for yourself and for your pupils. And we're going to be doing all that we can to try to seek clarity, but it is regrettable. You know, the Minister had a lot of time to put in contingency measures, and he didn't. So.
Yeah, Sean, we've been appealing on your behalf and on your children's behalf on this issue for months and months and months, and the typical intransigence has been nothing short of appalling. So yeah, as Helena says, we are pushing that one, meeting with SIA next week. We know they're comfortable with the majority of what we've been proposing all along. We just need the Minister to make some moves.
Okay, thank you, Graham and Helena, and thank you, Sean, for your question. We're going to move now to John Lister. And John, if you would unmute and switch your video on. Welcome, John.
Thanks. Can you see me okay? Yep.
You can indeed. You're looking well, John.
Oh, thanks, Harry. Yes, my son went past. He's, oh, there's Mr. Greer. So he went to Harmony Hill. My question is, I'm head of Lockshore Iota Centre, which would have about 60 young people on the roll. They're all classified as vulnerable, but obviously some are more vulnerable than others. At the minute, we have about 10 or 11 coming in. And so my question is, should we be persuaders with parents for young people to come in? The problem is, if they all come in, I won't have enough teachers. We won't be able to properly socially distance. Or should I remain neutral? Or should we sort of make a decision based on the needs of the child as to who we think should be coming in because they're more vulnerable than others? And just wondering what people think about that.
Helena, are you okay if I hog the microphone again?
Sure.
Hi, John. So I've received a bit of criticism from DE sort of behind the scenes, saying that too many of our schools are trying to dissuade children from taking up you know, the sort of provision that we can offer. In your case, you're dealing with some quite vulnerable children. So the DE's position will be that we have to pull out all the stops to have as much provision for our most vulnerable children as possible. But we made clear to DE this morning that if we have staffing issues, it's similar to how, you know, your GP might operate. If we don't have safe levels of staff, then we have to close. So we've asked the department today to go away. In fact, we phrased it like this: we are giving you an opportunity, Peter Weir, to make this work. If you don't allow our special sector, our IOTA sectors, to have some flexibility in the hours of provision and the way that they can provide for the children, then this thing is going to grind to a halt. They got that message very clearly from us today and from the other trade unions as well. At the moment, I would say, if you have children who can safely be well looked after at home and engage in learning, then you know, you have those beautiful relationships with your parents. Chat with those parents and the background of those kids, and see if they can be safely looked after outside of school. If that's not the case, then you make as much provision as you can. But if you can't safely provide for those children, if you don't have safe levels of staff, then you can't have them there.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. You're muted, Harry.
Sorry, thank you, John. Right. Thanks for your question. Everyone, we're going to only have time for one more question from Amanda Duffy-Phillips, and then we'll have a look at our polls. So if Amanda, if you can come up, please, now and ask your question. Welcome.
Thank you very much. My question is just around vaccines that Paul was talking about a few moments ago. And my staff, many of them do not wish to accept the vaccine if we are moved up the list. And they're wondering from a Department of Education point of view what the legalities around that potentially could be. They're fearful that it may impact on, for instance, sick pay or self-isolation should they be unfortunate enough to contract COVID.
Well, once we hear the word legalities, we all look at Helena. So Helena, do you want to pick that up?
I think it's a really interesting question. I have to say, I mean, it's not something that has arisen in our discussions yet, but it is definitely something that we will be raising with DE. Now, I don't know if Paul has anything. Has this come up in England?
Is this passing the ball to everybody until someone has to cross over the threshold? It is a tremendously interesting question. It's a really interesting legal question, and the human rights lawyers are climbing all over this already, and it probably does amount to a human rights question before it amounts to an employment law question. So I can't give you an answer other than to say someone's going to make a lot of money out of that in providing the answer at some point, and I just hope it's not the NAHT paying the bill. But no doubt we will get some clarity soon. But it seems to me, and this is someone who has no sufficient legal background, this is just my opinion, I'm not sure we can, as a nation, start to force people to accept vaccines and make their employment contingent upon it. So I would be very surprised if instructions came in that regard, but I wouldn't want to say for definite right now. So as soon as we know, we can get the answer out to that.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Paul and Helena. We're just going to share the results of our polls now. And the first question we had was, what percentage of your current enrollment is attending school? And 41% of you said that 0 to 10% were, 33% 11 to 20%, and 10% 20 to 30. We would suspect that those numbers in the lower categories with more pupils will creep up next week. We've just got to watch that. And the next question we asked you was about the numbers of staff you have available. What percentage of your staff are available to work? And that wasn't too bad, actually. 81 to 90% staff availability was 30%, and 91 to 100% of staff ability was 47%. But again, I think from incoming to the office, we would expect those numbers to change dramatically over the next week. So thank you everyone for taking part in our poll tonight. It just gives you an indication of how sad things can get, how difficult things may get, but thank you for taking part. Just before we go this evening, I want to turn first of all to our National President, Ruth. And Ruth, we hope that both you and Paul have been uplifted by being in Northern Ireland tonight. But Ruth, hopefully you'll say a few words for us now. Thank you.
Certainly, I'm just sorry that we're not there, that we're only there virtually, and I really hope that it won't be too long before we come and visit again. Yes, thank you everyone for taking time out of what, let's face it, must have been an already pretty crowded evening for you all. Taking time out to join your colleagues and your fellow members. These are times like none other. And you've joined this event this evening because you care. Because whatever the personal challenges you'll each be facing today and this week, ultimately the well-being and the long-term prospects of those learners in your care, they continue to matter to you. They matter to you greatly. And you know what? That's come across so again this evening incredibly powerfully. Paul started the event off by saying how proud he was of your sustained efforts. Our separate devolved governments in Wales and Northern Ireland, they're doing us no favours at the moment. Leading on from this session's discussion and seeking to draw the threads together, the first thing I want to remind you is that none of this is your fault. School closures are a response, whether it's in England, Northern Ireland or Wales. School closures are a response to the catastrophic failure of government to manage and control the crisis. The failure of government, not school leaders. We held an induction session this morning for branch officials new to their role. And in it, we spoke about modern trade unionism being about so much more than confrontation. You know, NAHT's unique blend of trade union principles with its strong professional association roots, it ensures that the interests of the learners we serve remain at the heart of all of our decisions. We're a solution-focused organisation. Somebody's already said that this evening. And like all good leaders, we love a long-term strategy, a sound plan. But sadly, we've witnessed little of this from government, particularly over the last 10 months. And the way in which you have successfully protected your communities in the face of such chaos illustrates how much as leaders we often achieve in spite of and not because of those who should be there to support schools. Ministers outclassed by teachers ran a recent Guardian headline, and it went on to explore the idea of reacting intelligently to challenging circumstances as being what sets us up as school leaders apart from government ministers. Governments that have been consistently behind the curve. But again, let's be clear, we're in this position of school closures because of a failure to rein in the recent surge of infection. Now, this evening has neither the time nor the scope to start a conversation around where the fault for this lies, but failures of judgment and planning, that's what's led us to this position that we now find ourselves in. And one thing I know is that failure isn't ours. We are victims of the fallout as much as the rest of our communities. And yet, you know, you still get up every day and lead your teams, lead your schools onwards and upwards in pursuit of those safe solutions. If the recent surge in infection is to be reined in, then it will obviously need a strategy. And we know that currently your government has neither a strategy nor a costed plan for a safe and orderly return to school. Schools, for their part, have neither the required specialist skill base or spare resources either to continue to manage the risks unsupported, particularly by government. We cannot continue to fight on our own. Tuesday, I think it was Tuesday should have been grasped by government, not as day one of lockdown, whatever number we are up to at the moment, but day one of the return to school plan. But sadly, the radio silence from government continues to deafen us. The prospect of an unsafe return to school worries us, but so does the prospect of an indeterminate period of time, period of school closure, because without even a draft return date, then we'll just be left wallowing without a plan, and that worries us even more. So, in the face of what undoubtedly presents at times as gross incompetence and self-serving indifference sometimes, you, as school leaders, you've proved yourselves to be trustworthy. Disheartened we may have a right to be, but the quality of debate this evening, the energy and the determination to continue with the fight towards long-term safe and sustainable solutions should encourage every single one of you. Thank you. Thank you for all that you've done to get us to this point and to all that you continue to do. You may be assured of the continued support and high visibility of your trade union behind you at all times. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Ruth, for those inspiring words. And thank you this evening to all of our panelists, to Helena and to Graham, who continue to work so hard every hour of every single day on members' behalf. Thank you also to Paul, our General Secretary. Paul, before we do close, is there anything you want to finish off with?
Just to echo Ruth's comments, restate just how proud I am with everything that school leaders are doing. And when they attack us, you know you're winning the argument. So when you read the stuff in the press that isn't helpful, you know what you're doing, your communities know what you're doing. Stand strong, and we'll keep working in every angle we can to bring some relief to the pressures that you're under. But thank you for the evening this evening. Thanks for coming along when you really need to rest. And together as a community, we will make sure that ministers and politicians eventually make the right decisions. But nice to see you all virtually.
Thank you very much, Paul. And to everyone this evening, thank you for attending. For the questions we didn't get to answer, we will make sure that we will answer them directly or in our frequent updates. I have to say a very big thank you in the background there to Laura Flynn, who's been assisting us with all the tech tonight. We really appreciate it. We do want to remind everyone of where you go for support when you need it, and that's Patsy, or the NAHT office. You know where we are, you know us all. Please do get in touch and we're there to help you. A replay of this meeting tonight will be available tomorrow. And I'm just going to sign off tonight by thanking you all for attending and wishing you continued good luck. Keep the good work up, and thank you to everyone. Good evening.